person's roll call. And I'm just gonna call off everybody as I see it in the participants roll. Julius Oliver, Jennifer Osinger, Rick Beeks, Beverly Hosey, Sharon Woodbury, Valencia Morrow, Hunter Morrison, Ian Beniston, Jack Daltrey, Jeff Molintarno, McNally, Nick Cretion, Samantha Turner, Sharon Douglas, Sharon Letson, and it's Jeff Molintarno again. Did I miss anybody? Okay.
No.
We're going to go on to item number 2, new business. First up, presentation of the SID. Shannon, MS Consultants.
Hello, thank you, Councilman Oliver, council members, city staff, for having me and Sharon Letson from Cityscape today to present to you. I am here to present on the Special Improvement District that we are working with Cityscape and other property owners to implement in downtown Youngstown, and wanted to present to you all on the process as we will be requesting action on some legislation in the coming weeks and months from you all. So really just wanted to present to, kind of let you guys know what a SID is, what we're doing, and what the ask is that's going to be kind of coming towards you in the coming months. So I'm going to share my screen if it's okay, and pull up this presentation. I will try to monitor if anyone wants me to stop and explain things as I go, but it's a little harder to do on Zoom. So I will definitely be able to answer questions at the end as well. So 1 second. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Or if I can just get one yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so again, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be partnering with Cityscape on this endeavor. As you all know, MS is a property owner in Youngstown, so this, special improvement district affects us directly, and we are definitely a supportive property owner of this endeavor. Mm-hmm. So today I want to cover, for those of you who are unfamiliar with special improvement districts or need a refresher, some basics on SIDs. We'll talk about other Ohio SIDs. We'll talk about why, we think it's a good idea to do a SID in Youngstown, downtown Youngstown at this point. And then next steps in the process that we're currently working on with Cityscape and that we, will be asking of property owners and the city. So for SID Basics, just really quick, and sorry, these first set of slides are pretty text heavy, but just wanted to make sure that you guys can read them later if you need to. So first, just the definition of a special improvement district. It basically is a new nonprofit that's formed that allows private property owners in a self-defined area, a contiguous self-defined area, to establish a program for services or improvements. They do that by assessing themselves a certain amount of money every year, and we'll go in on, as I keep going, we'll talk about how this is formed, how the assessment is determined. This is just the overview. The SID is governed by this new nonprofit that's created, and the board of that nonprofit is made up of property owners that own property within the SID, as well as 2 representatives from the city, one from the executive, which in this case is the mayor, and one from city council. An important thing to note about SIDs is that government property and churches are exempt from SID assessments, but can volunteer or participate voluntarily, which is why we're talking to you all today. It's very common for the city that SIDs are in to participate and opt in their property. And note what's missing here is that nonprofits are not exempt from SID assessments. So while and you think of an assessment as a tax, and this assessment does go on a tax bill. In this case, nonprofits are assessed in the same way any other private owner is, because it is not technically a tax. It is a special assessment. So A little background, I guess, should have started on this, on SIDS and why MS is helping Cityscape do this process. I actually started my career at the special improvement districts in downtown Columbus, and through that process went through multiple reassessments and reestablishments of those SIDS. As you'll see, that's required to happen every few years. And since then, as a consultant, have helped a few different communities in Ohio set up special improvement districts. So this is oddly one of my specialties. We're one of the only consultants in the state that kind of does this, because they are definitely a little bit wonky. So as part of the process for setting up a SID, the way I set up a SID is in 3 phases. Phase 1 is really kind of formation. It's where we are right now. It is where we are calculating all the frontage and the square footage and property values in the potential district. We're meeting with property owners to gauge their interest in a special improvement district. Some of you, who I've been meeting with for, well over a year, because COVID kind of, was that little 1-year break that everyone took. So we took a little break. So we've really been working on this for about 2 years now, and having these meetings. We hold these meetings individually or in small groups. And a big part of this is just educating property owners and the city and any other interested parties on what a SID is, and have understanding from them what services they think a SID could provide to them. And we've done a lot of that so far. So the other thing that we're doing right now is we are playing with assessment formulas and the plan for the services that the SID is going to provide. The assessment formula can be based on almost anything, as long as property owners receive equal benefits. And equal benefits really just means the hope is that a SID, you pay money to make money. Property owners are putting money into this because they believe that the services that are going to be provided are eventually going to raise their property values, because it's going to become a more desirable place to locate for businesses. So really, that equal benefit could just be that equal, the ship is rising for everyone. Assessment formulas are commonly based on property value, frontage, and land use. We have been going through multiple iterations of different assessments over the last couple years for this special improvement district. Right now, we're thinking probably frontage and land use are the two factors that we will be using in this special improvement district. The plan for services includes the final boundary, which we'll go in through this presentation and show you that for Youngstown. The types of services the SID is allowed to provide. So a plan for services for the SID lays out in detail how the assessment funds are allowed to be used. And those assessment funds cannot be used for anything that is not in that plan for services. The length of the SID assessment. So a SID assessment can be for as long as 10 years. Typically, it's between 5 and 10 years. And then SIDs have to reassess and basically redo this process we're doing right now to ensure that property owners are on board again with self-assessing themselves. We also create a plan for how Board of Trustees will be chosen. Per Ohio Revised Code, the board must have a minimum of 5 members, 2 appointed by the city, as I said. But typically, when I set up a SID, and when you look at the other SIDs across the state of Ohio, they have between 7 and 13 members. This ensures that there are different seats for different property owner types. So maybe there's someone representing residential. There's someone representing nonprofits, someone representing small properties. So obviously we know that the property values and frontages of different property owners are very different throughout any city, and especially in Youngstown. So it's important to just make sure that basically your board represents what the makeup of your city actually is in terms of property owners. We create a plan for who will manage a SID. So across Ohio, there are many different ways this is done when an organization such as Cityscape already exists. So the SID could be a totally separate entity from Cityscape. The SID could be managed by Cityscape staff. the SID could contract with Cityscape to manage SID monies with quarterly progress reports. That last one is probably the most common, and based on our conversations with property owners, most likely what would probably happen. What this allows is that, Cityscape has offices already, they have staff. This allows cost sharing between the two organizations, and really, doesn't kind of layer administration to ensure that the assessment monies are being used for the services and not for kind of double administering the same types of programs. So the next phase of setting up a SID is petitioning property owners. And when I say petitioning property owners, I mean a real petition where we are, getting ink signatures from property owners and collecting them into a very large package and then submitting them. So those petitions need to be signed by either 60% of all frontage facing property owners, or frontage sorry, or 75% of all square footage. So that means that if one property owner, which isn't the case in Youngstown, but if one property owner owned 60% of all the frontage that was facing the public right of way, they could technically kind of create their own SID and pull in as many owners around them as they wanted, right? So this is kind of like an election, except we actually have to go 10% higher than a normal election. We got to get to that 60% instead of that 50%. Once 60% is reached, all owners within that SID are opted in and assessed the same, whether or not they signed a petition to create the SID or not. So very similar to, an election when, you're electing whether or not to have different types of assessments and levies.
Shannon, if I could ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
So have you already done a assessment on downtown or Youngstown properties that potentially could be involved within the SID of who would fall within this category already?
Yes, we have, and that's what I'm going to go into. That's the third thing I was going to cover, but I can definitely kind of skip to that if you're interested.
No, if you got it in there, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in phase 3, this is where you all come in and why we're talking to you right now. Council has to approve the creation of a special improvement district. So property owners petition to create it, but at the end of the day, you all have to pass an ordinance. You have to receive that petition. You have to pass an ordinance to create the special improvement district. You have to pass another ordinance to levy the assessment on behalf of the property owners for the SID. And then the city sends those assessment numbers to the county auditor for collection on tax bills. What's not in here but is later in the slide is the other thing that will be asking of you is an additional ordinance kind of before you even pass an ordinance to create a special improvement district, which is an ordinance to sign on and self-assess yourself for the SID. And that can be done during any phase in the process, during the petitioning process. So we'll kind of get to that. But basically, you guys, City Council at the end of the SID process ends up having, a lot of responsibility on, ensuring that the SID gets created after the petitioning process. So real quick, I'm going to touch on other SIDs in Ohio and what services SIDs can provide. So, and this is actually, I meant to update this. There are now, I think 26 SIDs in Ohio since this map was created. As you can see, they're kind of bunched in the larger cities. I don't know, how many, I feel like, we're in a city presentation, so maybe some of you have heard the term, the 8 that great that made the state great from back in the industrial area. So those were cities with large population in Ohio. And of the 8 that made the state great, and of our 8 large population centers in Ohio, Youngstown is the only one without a special improvement district. So this is a tool that a lot of cities use in their downtowns. And so we're definitely hoping that we can get Youngstown onto that list and turn them blue right there. So I've been talking about services of SID. You all already have Cityscape, so these services look pretty familiar to you, I'm sure. But SID services are really similar to what Cityscape is already doing. Clean services, beautification, safe services. These are all images from different cities in Ohio. But another thing that SIDs can do and use their assessments for are to fund infrastructure improvements. So in planning. So these images here kind of are from Cincinnati and the city of Columbus, and kind of show different things that the SID has done. This right here at the bottom is a food truck pop-up that happens in downtown Cincinnati twice a week all summer. The SID there runs that. This right here, this lit up bridge is some infrastructure that went in the convention center area of downtown Columbus. The SID had that managed that project and now maintains that project. So it's really good.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Councilwoman Davis. Well, they managed and everything else, but who paid for it?
Wait, who's talking? Yeah.
Anita.
Okay.
Anita.
Okay, so let's see. So for this infrastructure project, the bridge.
Yes.
Okay, so I was actually at the Columbus SIDS when we did this project. So this project was paid for in multiple ways. The first thing was the SID regular assessments was a percentage. These property owners along this street, which are a bunch of hotels, this is nationwide between 4th and 3rd, if you're familiar. So basically High Street is, you're kind of coming from High Street and going east right now in this photo. All the hotels assess themselves an additional amount of money, and then the city matched what the SID and the property owners put in to pay for the infrastructure. So that was how the construction was paid for. The maintenance is paid for by regular SID assessments. So the city does no maintenance. These lights are truly run by a box located in the downtown SID offices, and the SID is in charge of changing the colors and making sure that they're all running. The SID contracts to ensure these medians are all maintained. Not shown here, some of these medians are obviously landscaped a little bit better. So that's kind of what happened. So it's really a private public partnership. It's leveraging private dollars.
Thank you. Through the chair.
Yes, Anita.
Yeah. So is that typical that when there's an infrastructure project or any kind of project, that those municipalities all end up matching the cost? Or does the SID ever sustain all of the cost?
It is typical that if a SID does manage and participate in infrastructure improvement projects, it is typical for the city to match those dollars in what I've seen. And it's not not all SIDs even provide those types of services, but the ones that they do, typically the city kind of matches those dollars and really creates that infrastructure. And the benefit is that while you might be paying to do the infrastructure, you don't have to pay to maintain it, right? The SID and the property owners maintain that. And that's a big cost, maintenance over, 20, 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions before I on just SID basics before I jump into downtown Youngstown? All right, you can always feel free to interrupt me. Okay, so go ahead.
Interrupt through the chair.
Okay. This right here shows two boundaries in some different things. In black, so this black boundary is right now the boundary we're looking at for the special improvement district. In this red boundary is the Cityscape service area currently. So it's just Wick Park and a little bit of most of the CBD of downtown. Laid on top of that is the Smart 2 network, right? You all know, the build project, there's a lot of streetscape investment going on, which is kind of how we created this SID service area by following this autonomous shuttle line, this complete street enhancement line, because we know that those areas need to be maintained. So right now, Cityscape in just the red areas provides the following services. They plant and water 160 plus planting pots. As you all know, I think tomorrow is Streetscape 2021, where all of this is going to be planted and maintained. They plant and water 24 plus beds within the city. They do ongoing weed control, litter removal, graffiti removal. They have a sidewalk squad, and they run the cigarette butt program. So that's just in the little area they currently do with their existing budget. With the build grant, what you see here are, the beautiful improvements that we're already seeing built in downtown Youngstown. These need to be maintained somehow. So again, I'm going to show that boundary of where all of those improvements are going is all these orange and green lines. And so the additional services that's going to create for maintenance, regardless of who does it, if Cityscape did it, it would be additional landscaping, a larger sidewalk squad, weakened litter control, and additional streetlight audits. New services that really are needed based on what is happening, based on this new landscape, but also based on just general the energy that's happening downtown already, and that we all want to capitalize on. Power washing, additional marketing for downtown events, tree pruning. We're going to have a lot more trees. It's already something that's hard to keep up with. General special projects, and obviously if a DORA is put in place, that adds a lot of safety and litter control that would need to happen as well. And typically SIDS help take care of that. So this is the estimated budget. Sharon, did you want me to go through this budget, or would you like to go through this budget?
Sharon?
I'm happy to go through the budget. So this is a hard, because you're really estimating what your costs would be. And it's a transparent process in the sense that whatever money comes into the SID, there's reporting done quarterly. So however the money is spent, so if the downtown businesses decide that they want all their sidewalks power washed, and we spend, $40,000 on that, you will see all of just as you do now. The sidewalk squad. Our irrigation costs right now run about $3,000 a year. Currently, we don't do tree pruning, but we have Dave starts one person trimming all the trees throughout the city. Part of the build and the investment in the infrastructure in the downtown, the critical part of that is maintenance. When you receive funding like we have as a city, the question that the federal and the state level are asking, who's going to maintain our investment? Who's going to keep things looking the way they do? And that's really what this budget shows, kind of what the costs are, what we might be able to do. This is nothing set in stone. This is just a guesstimate at how money could be spent. I think that's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Sharon. Does anybody have any questions about that? Or Shannon, do you go back into your presentation?
Yep, I can go back in. Okay, so next here, and sorry to get this all on one page, I turned the city around. So, you know, this is a river over here on your right hand side of your screen. And, you know, up here is Mercy. Is showing the property ownership within the SID. Right here in green, we've done nonprofit organizations and private organizations. And as I said, they're assessed similarly. So you can see that there's some green, but not a ton of green within this boundary. There's a lot of blue, which is exempt properties, including the city. And there's a good amount of purple, which in purple and pink, which are additional exempt properties that include, you know, land bank properties, the transit authority properties, school district properties, and YSU. Note that what we did here was only include property for YSU that abuts the right of way for right now. Which is really just because that's a property that benefits from the maintenance and that they need to help, you know, that they want maintained as well for their students. So that's kind of why we've got some holes going on in here, because we're really concentrating on just this network of improvements and what needs maintained. So how this looks, this map plays out in numbers. Is that the city has 16% of the frontage in within this SID boundary. YSU has 12%, Mercy has 7%, which is all up here, and that we included just because of the complete street enhancements that are happening there. And then private property owners have 52%. 13% is exempt. And so like when you do a partitioning process, basically I remove these 42 parcels from the calculation. And really I'm just concentrating on what's going on for the private owners that are not exempt. But what our ask is that the city match what we can raise from the private owners. So we've done some calculations and we've met with owners, and we think that the max amount we can raise from just the 302 parcels that are private owners that are not YSU, not Mercy, is $200,000, and that ensures, and we would base that calculation on frontage. So basically, of all the frontage would be charged a certain amount of money to kind of get to that $200,000. So the ask is, you know, that the city match that annual contribution. Sharon, do you have anything else kind of about that ask?
Sharon?
Well,
I think, sorry.
I think that's okay. I think two things. This is pretty typical for a city to take the lead in this formation, because it helps our city with maintenance long term. The other thing is that CDCs who do the work that of like a Cityscape typically are all funded this way. They have the revenue stream that is something like this, because currently we get some CDBG funds, but those don't last forever, and this is an ongoing. These maintenance is ongoing. It's not something anybody can stop doing. The cigarette butts need cleaned up. The sidewalks need cleaned. The flowers need planted. They need watered. Things need weeded. You know, our lights need to be checked. Our irrigation. I mean, it goes on and on. It's just like home. It does. You don't plant and walk away. It's a constant. And it's a constant economic development tool in how you look as a city. These things are important in our businesses, because how you look and the things that as a business community that we can do together, whether it be a food truck festival, an event. You know, when we do the holiday parade, that's another thing that Cityscape has done over the years, a holiday parade. what I hear from downtown businesses, it's like the best night of the year. The restaurants are packed. It's a feel-good feeling. Our families throughout the city get to come downtown, have a free event. It's really the connectiveness that Cityscape for 24 years has been working towards. So
I see two hands, Anita Davis first and Amanda, and I want to acknowledge that Councilman Mike Ray has joined the meeting, as well as President Domain Kitchen.
Okay. Thank you to the chair. So what was the amount that the Cityscape received this year from the CDBG funds?
do you mean last year, Anita? I don't know for this year or this coming up. Which do you mean?
Okay, what did we receive last year then?
Last year was 35,000.
Okay, thank you. And follow up to the chair, do the Cityscape still receive all of the fees from the holiday parade, or is that going to someone else now?
Well, it's a wash, Anita. The fees, the lights alone cost $30,000. It's a wash.
Well, I just want to know how.
Yeah, no, they go to the vendor for, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Turner.
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Hudson, I have, I guess, two questions, or maybe this is to Shannon. First, when it comes to establishing the SID, this is something that happens in business districts to help improve the quality of the district overall, which in turn can spur some economic development and more investment by the business owners. Yes? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, I understand there's been some conversation in regards to the Smart 2. Would this also be a part of managing that? Because I know that we need to manage what is put in during the Smart 2 process. So is this all interconnected to help the development move seamlessly through the Smart 2 project and into the downtown entertainment district?
Yes, that is the idea. This annual revenue that that the SID would raise would manage all the maintenance for all those improvements, and hopefully spur some additional improvements in other parts of downtown.
Thank you. And one more question through the chair.
Go ahead, Samantha.
I think this question, I don't know if Chuck is on or Sharon, you might be the answer to this because I know you assisted in this. For the Smart 2, is there some type of stipulation that we have to have it managed or have to have that laid out, or have to know what's going to be happening to maintain and upkeep the investment?
Well, from what I understand from Eastgate, written into the grant was this component of maintenance. It just makes, I mean, it makes sense to me. Anyone that's investing in something, the investment is one piece of it, but then the further maintaining of what they've invested is as equally as critical of a piece as that first spot, you know, the dollars. And I think it speaks to further investment in our other corridors when federal government sees how well something is managed and maintained. It makes them look good. It makes our city look good, and hopefully it brings on other projects and other investment.
Thank you. I just have one more question through the chair.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Thank you, Shannon. So you said you've been involved in a few SIDs across the state. Can this happen in other neighborhoods with other organizations, or is it just simply for downtown business areas?
Yes, thank you for that question. So I scrolled up, hopefully I didn't make you dizzy doing it, to this map here. Each little pin that you see here is an individual special improvement district. So as you can see, especially in Columbus and Cleveland, there are multiple special improvement districts in different neighborhoods in those cities. So this is definitely a tool that can be used by any neighborhood to help with their maintenance, to beautify, and there's so many different services that this can be used to provide. So right now we're talking about clean and safe in downtown Youngstown and maintaining landscaping. But in downtown Columbus, a couple of the SIDs are really focused on addressing facade improvements, addressing helping to find homes for homeless individuals, helping support substance use disorder, like providers who do that. I mean, there are just so many different things that SID funds can be used for. The only thing you can't use SID funds for are to replace existing city services. So, but you can supplement those services. So yes, I could see that this type of organization could be replicated throughout the neighborhoods in Youngstown, and that this is really just hopefully a pilot program for what will be many SIDs throughout Youngstown.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, one more question through the chair.
One more question, Councilwoman Turner.
I don't mean to get into the weeds, but I'm intrigued here. So the outline in the area of the SID, you would connect it from, I would say, where the Smart 2 is around the downtown district, but that could also be replicated in neighborhoods as well. That's so in residential areas, it can be connected. So you're saying that can happen in the city because it has happened across the state?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you for asking that question, Councilwoman Turner. I wanted to make sure people understood that this can happen in other parts of the city. I'd like to put on the record that Councilwoman Adamczak has rejoined the meeting and will resume chair.
Thank you, Councilman Oliver. If you want to, because I missed the first part of the discussion, if you want to go ahead and finish this topic, and then I'll take over once we move on to ordinance 21-172.
Sure.
Thanks.
Shannon?
Okay, I think all I had, my last slide was just about next steps. So a city can opt in their property in kind of two different ways, or in the same way, but at two different times. The city can choose to, and I have done it both ways. The city can choose to pass legislation early on in the process, authorizing the mayor to sign a petition opting the city property into the SID for up to the desired contribution amount per year. Like you could say to the mayor, if you were to do $200,000, of our ask, you could see the legislation would read, the mayor can sign a petition opting in city property and contribute a sum of up to $200,000 a year. And then if the petition he signs is for $100,000 at the end of the day, once we get into petitioning, that's what it is. But he can't sign over, but he can sign kind of up to that amount. And that's really what we're asking of you guys, or you today, and the reason we're asking that is as we've been meeting with property owners, and this is common, throughout the state, the question is, well, the city has a lot of property. What are they contributing? And by you passing an ordinance, opting in and saying what you're contributing earlier in the process gives property owners comfort to then opt in their own property as well. So that's why we're kind of making that ask to you, and hoping that you might consider that legislation. I'll pause. I think I see a hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Anita?
Yes, to the chair. So what you're saying is not only would you ask the city to match what was raised in the assessments, but then the city would also include itself additionally as part of the assessment?
No, that match would be including the property, and you would basically be at this amount per year. Because you aren't required to pay an assessment, you get to choose what your assessment is. So that's all it is. It's not that you would get, it would be 200 plus the actual assessment formula. It would only be up, 200 a year total.
Through the chair.
Yes, Nita.
Okay, because I'm trying to make sure I'm not mishearing or taking it in the wrong way. So at the present time, the city is not paying this an assessment, but you would have the city, meaning taxpayers of Youngstown, pay an additional $200,000 in special assessments for the downtown.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon, so I got a just quick question for you. I know in other cities across the state, the SID is the way that downtowns have become progressive and grown and expanded and been able to do multiple projects that the city itself weren't able to do. I think one of the biggest things that we need is the SID, especially for our DORA project. And I feel that way because there are going to be a lot of people walking around downtown with alcohol going from establishment to establishment. And I know in Cleveland, they have what's called ambassador to be able to help out with that process. So people don't get out of control. People have somebody to talk to, people feel safe. People know, the guidelines or the boundaries in which they need to stay. Downtown Youngstown, we're particularly having a problem right now with nightlife exiting downtown after 2 a.m. Would the SID be able to assist DORA and that nightlife situation moving forward in that manner?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I'm just going back up to this budget so you can kind of see what we had outlined here. So that is this safety patrol line item right here. That yes, there would be safety ambassadors employed to do that. Another thing that SIDs do, I actually helped the city of Newark set up their SID and then also set up their DORA. And in that DORA, they hire special duty police as well. So to be there during DORA events. So there are multiple ways that SID funds can be used to both manage the DORA and also supplement any safety services and special duty police services that would need to happen during those events or on weekends. And then obviously the next day, ensure that, litter is picked up and things like that. One thing I want to note for the DORA that is great to have a SID managing it that we did in Newark is that Newark is able to basically track by establishment because it's assigned different colors to different establishments for the cups they're using. Maybe who those establishments are that might be having a lot of litter on the streets and things like that. So you can kind of have businesses become responsive in ensuring that their patrons are cleaning up, because if, the next morning SID ambassadors and sidewalk squad are out and all the cups and all the litter is from one establishment, you can kind of track kind of how to remedy that situation going forward. So the SID typically can play a huge role in ensuring that the DORA is successful for everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I had two hands up, Shannon, then Mike Ray. I'm sorry, Sharon, then Mike Ray. And Sharon, I'm glad you raised your hand. I was going to, before you make your statement or ask your question, I was going to ask you, how do you see, with all your experience in economic development, how do you see the SID playing the role within our downtown and throughout the city? So Sharon.
So I think that this is a great tool for downtown to have. We've actually had this discussion about SID dating back to 2012 and even previous and prior to that. What was always key was having a nonprofit that was willing to step up into the space of what's needed in order to be the manager and taking the lead on the SID. So I am happy to hear that we're making this progress. I've had been participating in some of these conversations before. Certainly now that we've made these improvements, even with Phelps Street, that it's important for us to have something like this in place. My question is, early on in the presentation, Shannon, you presented a structure where Cityscape would be managing it. It seemed as if there would be a different nonprofit formed in order to take on the SID. And so what does that look like?
Yes, thank you for that question. So for a special improvement district, Ohio revised code requires that a new nonprofit be formed, and that nonprofit have a board made up of property owners. So you can't get around that. So two nonprofits exist. However, one way that a lot of folks manage this, the Short North in Columbus manages it this way, is that the SID board contracts with the Cityscape board to manage SID monies with quarterly progress reports. So what that does is it allows Sharon, who's executive director, of Cityscape, to be able to take those SID monies that through the service plan are designated for only certain uses and put them into the Cityscape budget. So she's only dealing with one budget a year and only dealing with one board most of the year, and operating that all seamlessly. Then that SID board meets quarterly to receive updates from Sharon on how's our money being spent. Is it being spent correctly? Do we have any changes? Things like that. So that is most likely the most seamless way to do this process, in that a lot of SIDs throughout Ohio do this.
You have a follow-up, Sharon Woodbury?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Ray?
Thank you. I think this makes sense in a lot of ways. One thing that does come to mind is, the folks in other neighborhoods saying, we're spending money somewhere else. But I think that as downtowns continue to grow, we've continued to invest in downtown. We have an obligation to manage that and make sure we continue to. As the speaker from MS talked about Short North, I'm very familiar with when that neighborhood, started to revitalize, and they built Victoria Gate and those things, and, in the 90s, and how that's been managed well. And you've watched it grow further and further between campus and downtown, and how that's all connected there on High Street. So knowing that if we manage that correctly, we can see that grow out into our corridors. I mean, what benefits one area of the city and helps keep it up and stabilize, it benefits others. We're all going to have added benefit from a more beautified and stable downtown area and core. So I think that's the takeaway. At one side, you think we put so much resources in one area, but I feel comfortable being able to go back and say, this makes sense because this improves all of the city. It's gonna have other effects that irradiate out from that city core. So I think it's a great idea. It's working out some of those details, what those right amounts are, and what makes sense.
I would agree with Councilman Ray fully. Sharon Letson, I seen your hand up, and Councilman McNally.
Just one thing I wanted to say to everyone is that because I want to be transparent, Cityscape has hired Shannon, MS Consultants, because they have done this process throughout the state. We were not experts in this. We felt like we had to pay to have the help for all of us to work through this. And as you said, Mike and Julius, both, I think everyone has said, I think that the council saying that they think the city should set the tone and be in is the first step. How we work through the process and get to the final details, because it is, we do not have all the answers. And all of us know this, whatever money goes into this SID, everyone will know how it's spent, but we have to be able to, together to figure out the numbers and we have to convince the business. The first step is the city stepping up, and then the next step will be the businesses downtown.
Absolutely. From McNally, then Sharon Woodbury. I see Anita Davis as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I just, Councilman Ray said it perfectly. I agree with everything that he said there. I don't think I could even add anything to that, to be honest. But I did have a question just as far as like timelines for this process. Have you guys laid those out yet?
Yes, Chair, can I answer?
Shannon? Yeah, sure, Shannon.
Yes, so the timeline always works back from around November of any year. That is when special assessments and any sidewalk assessments, anything like that is due to a county auditor. So a SID can only operate in full year increments, which means that at this point, we are probably looking at assessments beginning in 2023. I'm like looking at the date. So I do not believe if we could get all these petitions signed this summer very quickly and have a SID, have legislation to you by September, we would then be in line to submit assessments to the auditor in November, and special assessments would start in May of 2022 with that first tax bill. However, we're already at the beginning of June of this year, so most likely we won't meet that deadline, and instead we would do this throughout next year, probably still be done early in the year, but assessments would not be collected until begin to be collected until May of 2023. So we are going to do everything we can if the city is on board to try to wrap this up in the next few months, but we are, typically this process from where we are right now does take about 6 to 9 months. So it would definitely be a shortened time frame, but I will say in Newark, Ohio, we did do this in a very short amount of time. So it's definitely been done before.
Thank you, Shannon. Sharon Woodbury.
I actually have two questions. One, we also discussed earlier on in the conversation that right now the city is providing funding to Cityscape through block grant dollars. So in this scenario, are we essentially looking at just $160,000 increase, because there's already $40,000 that's going to Cityscape, and increasing that participation from the city through the SID, as opposed to, or the match through the SID, as opposed to relying on block grant dollars to fund?
Sharon Letson.
Yes, Sharon. However, I think that this is a much larger scope than so I'm not sure about the numbers, but yes, we would get to a point where we would walk away from the block grant money. Yes.
My second question is for Shannon. I am fairly confident that it's not much of a factor with downtown in terms of as you're kind of projecting and doing the financials on the funding and what needs to be generated. There's not a lot of abandoned and tax delinquent property downtown, but in some areas, as we look to expand that, that would become more of an issue. So when you do that analysis, how do you factor in tax delinquent properties if you're looking to expand a SID to certain areas? Is it typical for the approach to be to try to find an area where there's pretty good occupancy, so that you have a good base of property owners to pay into the SID, because it does fall onto the responsibility of the property owners to do a heavy lift with the SID?
Yes, thank you for that question. Definitely. I think that creating a SID is something you do in an area that already has a little momentum, already has property owners that are invested in their community. So it's a, you know, obviously anywhere there might be some tax delinquent and, you know, property owners that kind of aren't participating. However, you definitely want to do this in neighborhoods where property owners are already kind of showing that they're willing to invest.
Councilwoman Davis.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Some of this sounds okay, almost okay. But let me say, if my understanding is that we would be committing, because you're saying it's most of it is kind of relying upon the fact that the city would have to buy into doing this special assessment against city properties. So if not, we would be adding to our indebtedness, our projected debt, with one for the COVID funds that we were getting, and an additional $200,000 a year. And if we go, am I correct? Is that what it is? That we would be committing the city for $200,000 for the duration of the piece of legislation, whether it be 3 years or 5 years or 10 years?
Correct.
Okay. And so is that's based upon the assessment and not based upon the tax dollars actually received, the property taxes?
Correct. That is based on what we believe that we can raise from property owners who will be assessed a certain amount per square footage of their property owner and or per front footage facing the public right of way.
And should they fall delinquent in the payment of the assessment, what's the remedy?
So the remedy is actually taken care by the auditor in the way they fall delinquent from any tax payment. So they get charged interest. The auditor is the one, you know, kind of trying to collect that tax bill. So once that money is collected, the SID receives that money back with whatever interest was charged over time.
So then for sure, the SID would receive the city's tax dollars, but not necessarily every single business owner's tax dollars.
You would not receive tax dollars if they are a delinquent tax owner in the same way you don't receive their tax dollars at any time, because yes, it is collected on the tax bill.
Okay. All right. And hey, thank you so much.
Councilwoman Adams-Act.
Thank you, and I apologize. Like I mentioned, I missed the beginning of the presentation. So I'm not familiar with the, I guess, the protocol. So was there like I guess some kind of like analysis already done what businesses are willing to contribute? Because it sounds to me as though once this is in place, that all the businesses don't really have a choice. So is there like a certain percentage that needs to be petitioned in agreement to have this?
Yes. So this right here, I'll just recap real quick. Phase one is what we're in right now, which is talking to the property owners to try to ensure that when we do move into phase two petitioning, that we do kind of know we have that support and know what these, you know, the petition should look like, what assessment it should be, things like that. So we need 60% of all the frontage facing public right of way signed on. That means however many property owners that represents that 60% of frontage is, you know, depends on which property owners sign on. But yes, 60% of the frontage needs to be represented, and then it opts everyone in. And then the legislation goes to council for council to create the SID.
Okay, and as a follow-up, because I keep hearing the 200,000, I'm assuming that's based on a particular, you know, percentage of what's going to be raised by the other property owners. Is there like a standard across the state how much the cities contribute? It sounds to me that 200,000 from the city is a bit high. Like I thought that the point of a SID is for the businesses to be contributing and finding means of raising money, not so much to have so much support from the city as we're already supporting in other measures.
It is different throughout the state. It truly is. There's really not, I have not seen one thing happen in any way. In Columbus, they opt in their property for whatever the assessment formula is for all of their special improvement districts. In Cleveland, I believe it might be a little different per SID. In Newark, Ohio, for example, they are raising $150,000, and of that $150,000, 50,000 comes from the city. So it's a pretty large percentage. You know, the city is contributing 1/3 of the total budget to the SID. So it very much depends on what the kind of political climate is and what property owners are wanting to see from the city and investment for them to then put up their dollars.
Okay, and through the chair, two more questions. I mean, I think the SID in the downtown area, I mean, I think it's good. I'm not sure how exactly it should be laid out in terms of 200,000 is the right portion for the city to give. And the reason for that is because I hear a lot of my colleagues have concerns with what do we do in the neighborhoods, and the response has been we can move this into the neighborhoods. With that being said, at that point, then obviously there would be a desired contribution from the city as well. So now that 200,000 is going to be multiplied, you know what I mean, and compounded, because now this neighborhood's going to want and ask from the city, this neighborhood, and now it puts the city, it just in an even larger hole. So I mean, I would like to see this move forward, but perhaps maybe not with the 200,000. I guess I would have to do a little bit more research to see what the standard is. But I'm seeing that YSU is not contributing. Is there a reason for that? Because usually I feel that they're a really good anchor and support with our projects downtown. And from when I got on, from the looks of it, the map surrounds, the SID district surrounds YSU. Why is YSU not being included?
So this isn't showing YSU not contributing. This is us showing we don't know how much YSU and Mercy would be willing to contribute. The 0 shows exempt properties, churches, and things like that not contributing. So sorry about that. That was misleading. We will be making an ask to YSU and to Mercy Health about that. Sharon, Chair, can I ask Sharon to
have those conversations been started with those entities to see if they, I mean, are they maybe for, but they're not sure, or have conversations not even been started?
That to be answered by Sharon Letson.
Yeah. So Basha, I think that the first step is the city in, and that's where we are right now. The first step is for us to be able to say the city is in support of this, and then for us to go through our process to line up everyone. I think that the most important message is that the city sees the value in this maintenance plan, in this investment, and then we go from there. And if I understand what Shannon is saying, the first part is council agreeing to this up to a certain amount of money. And then we're going to continue with the process to see, just to line it all up right.
One thing, if I can, that I want to know that potentially adds to, maybe creates a little bit more comfort, is that while this first piece of legislation is you saying yes up to a certain amount of money, that doesn't marry you to it, because at the end of the day, once we're done petitioning, it's going to come back to you again, and you're going to have to, and then you actually approve the SID. So this is just saying, yes, we would put, if a SID is created, we would put our property in and do a voluntary contribution up to this amount. And obviously it's your prerogative for the amount.
I see your hand, Samantha. I don't know if you were done, Basha. I got a quick question to ask. I don't see anybody on here from finance, I don't think. So maybe Sharon Woodbury can answer the question, but in any investment, there's always an expected return. So if the city invests $200,000, ultimately these improvements would somehow increase the city's pot, I'm guessing, as it pertains to taxes or income coming back into the city. Is that correct in my assumption, or I don't think the city will be given 200,000 and it's just a loss. I think the improvements would ultimately improve the city's economic standing, period. Am I correct in that assumption, or?
Through the chair, is that for me?
Yeah, yes, sure.
So I absolutely believe that it's a tool, an economic development tool, and that the idea is that by creating this environment that we can attract more businesses downtown. And with that, we'll get a growth in income tax and increasing our revenue. I think probably from the conversations that we've had from the owners of some of our office buildings, that they may have weighed in on what their challenges are, what would be helpful. I know lighting, feeling a sense of safety as they're walking from their home, from their offices to the vehicles is important, and that they believe that could help. So the end goal and what I think this should do is help with that. Don't have a number, and I don't know how that pans out in terms of our return on the 200,000. I had my hand up earlier because I wanted to know, as the tax values were looked at, did you see what the city would be contributing if it was just part of the same formula as the other property owners?
Shannon?
Let me,
I see you, Samantha and Lauren.
can I research that real quick, and then as you guys continue, and then let you know when I have that number?
Sure. Samantha?
Thank you, through the chair. So the 200,000, just to be clear, is based upon the percentage of land or parcels that the city owns. Is that correct?
It is based upon the frontage the city owns, correct?
And as we have, I'm sorry, one second. Okay, so as development happens and the frontage that we own, say we sell that to other businesses, that number could possibly decrease because we have developed the area in a way that the city is not don't own as much frontage throughout the corridor, correct? Is that a thing?
In the way that this assessment formula right now that we're asking, yes, that could be the case, right? Because we haven't finalized the assessment formula. So if you were to assess at a certain amount per frontage and set up your contribution that way, like we will pay X amount per every square footage frontage we own, and as some of your property sells off, yes, your contribution amount would decrease as that's sold off, and that new owner of that property is going to kind of take over that assessment at whatever rate we are assessing private owners per frontage. So that is definitely a way we could do that. Yes.
Thank you. I was just thinking of 20 Federal and what the movement that we're having with that. Then my next question is, because the SID is governed under a nonprofit, are there other ways of raising dollars and matching funds?
Yes. Oh, thank you for that question. I can't believe I didn't bring that up as a benefit earlier. Yes. So what is so great about this like very steady stream of funding is that this Cityscape can now apply for grants knowing that, hey, we have $100,000 that we know is coming to us next year that we can use to match this grant. Right now, Cityscape can try to do that, but really they're beholden to whatever they can raise from their property owners and that, or their downtown businesses, and that changes from year to year. This doesn't really change. So you have that known entity and you can plan further out and go after those larger grants. So yes.
Thank you. And just one more follow-up through the chair. If it's connected to the SID mentioned here, and say that this doesn't happen, what happens with the Smart 2 maintenance plan that we must have for the federal grant? I think that question might be for Sharon.
Well, I think then the city has to look at the cost for the city to employ the people that Cityscape's would employ. I mean, I think you have to look at the cost benefit. Even the work that we do, the $35,000 we get for Streetscape, we leverage that. I mean, right now our donations are $35,000. That beyond, CDBG funds. Those are private funds that are coming in here that we're able to pay our staff to continue to maintain. So, I mean, I think that's the question you ask: what it would cost the city to be able to do these services, because it would probably fall back most often to the city. And I think everyone knows how short staff they are.
Thank you, Sharon. Lauren and Basha.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the evaluation of the the $200,000. Sorry. So we sign on for the 200,000 as our annual contribution for 1 year, for 5 years, for how long?
So currently we are most likely going to be petitioning at a 5-year commitment from all property owners. And then a reassessment would happen where we would literally have to repetition and you would have to kind of recommit whatever amount. So it's only 5 years.
Okay. And then it said, and then based on what the timeline that you gave, it sounds like it takes a couple years for something to get it started and for it to actually kick in. So by the time we would be even in a position to do this in a neighborhood and somewhere else on one of the other 4 corridors, we'd be reassessing at that point the downtown one, give or more or less. So we would have the ability then to possibly shift monies outward to the corridors and assess ourselves differently in the downtown if it was functioning differently, stuff like that. So just wanted to, I'm thinking I'm correct in saying that based on what we said today, but I just wanted to put that out there as some of my colleagues, we're talking about monies in the neighborhoods.
Thank you, Lauren. Basha?
Thank you through the chair. I was just still trying to kind of understand the 200,000. Couple comments. First, looking at the slide that's currently up on the screen, based on the 52% and the annual contribution for the private being 200,000, if we use the same math, then the city should only be contributing about 40,000. Even if we were to take on the load of those that are exempt, that would still only bring us to about 75,000 if that's the formula we use. And then a question regarding Newark was brought up previously. I quickly looked up to see what the population of Newark is. It's about 50,000 and they contribute 50,000. So if we were to use them, kind of as a reference point, then that would bring us to about 60,000 based on our population. So I'm just trying to kind of find, I think 200,000 is needed in terms of, I think that's like shooting for the stars. I think it would be an ideal amount to do everything, that we want, but I'm trying to be a little more realistic to make sure that everyone is happy and we have concrete reasoning for 200,000 and not just an arbitrary number. That's all, it's just a comment.
Shannon, did you want to speak to that or take another question?
Yeah, I can I pulled up our old numbers from before, our old calculations. I had to pull up an old spreadsheet. And I mean, that is kind of close on. We were looking at a range of the city when we were looking at the assessment. Typically, when we first calculate, we try to say what's like 5% of taxes paid, or taxes that would be paid if you were, charged taxes. And the city was looking at between a $43,000 and an $43,000 a year to $86,000 a year. Typically, we would have settled at like 65,000 or 65,000 a year. Is what that was. And I guess I'll let Sharon kind of talk about why we reached for the stars at 200, which we do know is the, kind of max ask that we definitely wanted to make, if that's okay, Chair.
Can I help? Well, first of all,
Wait a minute, Sharon. Nita's had her hand up. I don't know if her
sorry.
question is on topic.
Yes. Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, so Basha addressed part of my thing, because I too looked at Newark's. I look at them frequently, and I looked at their numbers, and I thought that number of 200 just was way too high. And over 5 years, if we went into a 5-year agreement, which I could not see us doing, but that's $1 million that we would be encumbering the city with. And again, but for COVID, we wouldn't have this money to spare. I just want to remind people, though, this is really, we're operating this because we have extra money through ARP. So and again, say that's $1 million more being placed into downtown Youngstown. And I've listened, and Sharon Woodbury, she asked a question about the CDBG funds and about how much longer, or would they still be expected to receive the CDBG funds? And I believe the answer was yes, until they could not have to need it. And I would like to know, when would they not need the CDBG funds in addition to the $200,000? So when would they cut off the CDBG request?
Well, when we had this other revenue stream, Anita, is what I was saying.
From everyone, through the chair?
Go ahead, Anita.
Okay, the other revenue from the city or from the vendors downtown?
From the SID, which would include the city and the businesses.
Okay.
Yeah. We wouldn't take money both ways.
Well, that really was what I believe Sharon had asked, though. If we agreed to this, would you immediately cease the request for the CDBG funds?
Well, we couldn't until we had the other funding in place, or everything we did would go away.
Okay, thank you.
But we wouldn't double dip. No.
Could I maybe?
Shannon?
So the idea is, I think what Sharon's saying is, like, right now, she might ask for that money in 2022 because this investment we're asking for wouldn't be paid by you until 2023. But yes, the minute in the same year, you would never pay this contribution plus CDBG. This would replace, once you start paying this amount, it would replace what you're currently paying for CDBG.
Okay.
Me personally, I don't think before I get to Sharon Woodbury, I don't think the 200,000 is too large of an investment for everything that comes with us having a SID, which you can see in any city that has SIDs. I mean, it's the investment basically is for the city of Youngstown to have skin in the game, to be able to show that leadership, to make the other companies and other business owners and property owners comfortable enough to say, hey, well, the city believes in this, we need to believe in it as well if we all gonna come up together. And that's just a little statement before Sharon Woodbury speaks.
I'll refrain.
I was just going to say, I agree with Councilman Oliver in that it's important that the city provide some match and show that we are willing to invest in this as well. My initial question was, where do we fall in the formula? Because what I'm hearing is 200,000 is a pretty steep commitment from the city. So hearing from Shannon that when you look at the formula of how this would be calculated, that takes the city to a different number in the 43,000. I would say that by the city opting in the property, I think similar to some other community that you referenced, opting the city's property in and agreeing to pay based on the ownership, that does show a commitment from the city. But, you know, I think everyone probably is in agreement that it makes sense to bring Kyle into this discussion to see where we are in terms of funding and, you know, the 50,000 or whatever that number is, that's lower based on the formula, whether he thinks that's more feasible and something that we can absorb as opposed to the 200,000. So getting his input.
I'm sorry, Sherry, let's.
I would just like to just answer, say something about Newark, because I've been in downtown Newark. I went to see their SID. The space of Newark is nothing near what we're talking about. It's about the size of our Central Square and just our Federal Street from Central Square to Fifth Avenue. I mean, that's a better picture of the size of down. Their population may be closer to ours, but their downtown is a confined square, is how I would describe it. Is that how you would describe it, Shannon?
Yes, it's much smaller, but by 5 times smaller.
I mean, this build grant that goes all the way up Fifth Avenue is a large space of trees and greens and maintenance long term.
And well, I'll let the others go, and then I have a comment.
Thank you, Councilwoman Adams-Ack.
Thank you through the chair. Well, first I will, regarding going back to Newark as well, regarding, I guess, their size of their downtown. Even our size, that's subjective, because I know we keep expanding what we consider the downtown parameter. Like even looking at this map, I see that it extends to the city is extending, I believe, to the hospital. Yeah, to Mercy Health. So technically that too is outside of what traditionally is our downtown area. So we're doing that by choice. And that's why our SID area is larger than that of Newark's. But even that, the important thing is I want people to understand that I am not against the SID. I think it is necessary. I think that establishing and making sure our downtown is flourishing, as we've always mentioned, is going to bring investment, and then that eventually will radiate into the neighborhoods. However, I want to make sure that we as elected officials are able to go to our constituency, both our residents and our businesses, and are able to have a concrete reasoning for this 200,000, not because it sounds good, not because it's needed, but to have some type of data or mathematics as to why it makes sense. And so far, everything that I've heard, other than it being necessary as we're doing these comparisons, whether we're using a formula, whether we're using population or this and that, nothing is giving us the 200,000 other than that this is what we think is necessary. So I would just like to be able, with confidence, to be able to go to my constituents. It's almost like right now I'm having all these questions. My constituents are going to think of even more questions that I want to feel comfortable being able to answer. So like I said, instead of, I just want concrete reasoning. And as Sharon Woodbury mentioned, I would like to hear from our finance director if this is something, if the 200,000 is feasible. Do we need it? Again, I'll say, yes, that would be ideal, but I would like to know what is feasible and what the, data or mathematics is behind coming to a certain number. That's all. Thank you.
All right, before I go to Councilwoman Ally Shannon, did you want to bring some reasoning to that number?
Yeah, I think I pulled up the budget here, and Councilwoman Adams-Ack, like you just said, the way we came up with this number was from backwards from this budget, right? Between if the city put in, the SID would only be able to raise, you know, a certain amount of money based on what the property owners can kind of bear to put in. And so the reason your ask is kind of higher is to meet that middle gap of because of current property values and things like that, to meet the gap for the first 5 years to put more than you typically would in, so that we can operate and maintain what needs to be maintained based on all the build grant improvements. So you are right that the budget is, it's certainly kind of asking the city to take on that load to meet the missing funds.
Thank you, Shannon. I think with all the growing pains that downtown Youngstown and the city is experiencing right now, I think the SID is extremely important to get put in place, simply because the city itself doesn't seem to have the capacity to do what's needed. I know that doesn't 100% justify the 200,000, but moving forward, just having the conversation about bars and restaurants at our council meeting Wednesday, just that alone, getting those things under control and having a plan for business growth moving into the future, I think the city plays a major role. Councilwoman McNally?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Councilman Oliver, that this is the next step. I see this as an evolution of what we've been trying to do for the last 15 years on a smaller scale. It's time for us to step up to this larger scale with a SID, a formal SID in the downtown area, because we've invested a lot of money in the downtown area over the last 10, 15 years. We've grown it to the point that it's at right now. And we already have a future plan for even more of that. And so it's time for us to bump up our maintenance and our what we've been doing down there on a much smaller scale through Cityscape and stuff like that. It's time to be more formal about it. And quite frankly, I'm comfortable with the $200,000 because again, it's for 5 years, but then we can reassess at 5 years, and this really gets it up and going. And sometimes you need a little more money up front to get something up and running than you do after once it's established. And the hopes that I think this is an investment that will become an opportunity to have more revenue coming towards the city, like Sharon's mentioned, like we talked about today too, where hopefully it brings more businesses in. Businesses that are here are staying longer. They become more established in the city, and we don't have that turnover like we have seen because of it, because they have some skin in the game. Plus, things are just looking better and feeling better and more maintained down here. And so I see it as an investment that then will create a long-term, better, more stable revenue stream for us. Just some comments.
Thank you, Lauren. Samantha?
Thanks. And actually, I'm gonna agree wholeheartedly with Councilwoman McNally. And I also, I just wanted to say thank you to Sharon and the team at Cityscape for employing MS Consultants to look at this because you saw what we needed for the Smart 2 and how this could better improve all the areas around it. Because again, our downtown wouldn't look the way it looked if it wasn't for the volunteers and the staff at Cityscape. So we are extremely appreciative of this. So please, don't get us wrong about all of the questions that we have, just wanting to gain this clarity. But this is amazing. And this 200,000 per year is a small ask for us to maintain and upkeep the growth that we have put in and the dollars that are going in and will go in the future. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing this and bringing this to us so that we stay on our path of growth.
I agree. Councilwoman Davis?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I would not support $200,000. I just could not see doing that, not for 5 years, not for $1 million. And we have, one of the things we did in order to help our downtown was to go out and get that build grant that was all devoted for basically downtown Youngstown. And at some point we need to start, we keep saying time and again, we're going to see the benefit of it trickle into the rest of our areas. But when do we see this trickling effect? Like I said, $200,000 sounds like it's such a small amount, but when you looked at what we have as members of council with our discretionary spending for all of our 7 wards at $15,000, and that's a bump up. Okay, and this dollar amount that you're talking about here, if it's so, it's not insignificant when it equals what we have as a total of our discretionary funds. That's one thing I want to say. And then secondly, I don't understand why our finance director, was he invited? And I don't want to see us doing anything until we hear from him. I believe we need to have another meeting and he has to be there.
Thank you, Anita. I still think that the $200,000 is not a large investment when you compare.
Julius, you haven't seen anything downtown that you didn't think was worth the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
For the city to grow and improve, and that's what's happening. So with this 200,000, when you consider all the benefits that are coming along with it, everything that's going to be maintained, and the fact that downtown is growing, but we need facilitation for the growth that is still coming in the future. I mean, the bill grant isn't done yet, so you can't see the trickle from that yet because it's just getting started. It's not even completed. But in this situation with the SID, growth and maintenance of that growth to help it be maintained and continue to go up is what's needed exponentially. And I think that's what this SID does. Basha?
Thank you. Councilwoman Turner brought up a great point. She said how much the SID is going to benefit the surrounding neighboring area. And I think for that reason, I would really like conversation to already be started with the university and Mercy Health. I believe that the university has a foundation. I think they have about $250 million. So to ask the university to be able to contribute 200,000, I mean, isn't a crazy ask. So I mean, that would be, money that they would be able to contribute, and additionally whatever the hospital system would be able to contribute as well. But I wanted to know, was our finance director aware of this at all, and if he had any opinions? And I guess at the next meeting, because I do want to see this go forward. Like I said, I'm just not sure on the dollar amount, and I would like our finance director to be involved in the future meetings.
Thank you. Samantha, you have a...
Yes, thank you. Just to respond, I just want a point of clarity. This is up to 200,000, and I want to, Shannon, if you can help me with the steps. This is for us to put this legislation through so that you can begin to have those conversations with the other stakeholders along the mapped area. So right now you're coming to the city and you want to be able to say the city is willing to go, whether it's, if we get 50,000 out, then the city's gonna match that with our our percentage of frontage. But that just gives us the ability to have quality conversations. This isn't committing us to this 200,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those that may not know, this SID conversation is not a new conversation. We've been having this conversation for, at least with me being involved, for about 4 years. We used to meet every month in the city council caucus room with the business owners. And I know one of the things the business owners want to see is a real commitment from the city. It's like, we're all willing to do this. We're all willing to put our money in it. But, at the time it was like, where's the city at in this conversation? And so that's why I think the 200,000 is also very important, because to be able to encourage these business owners and property owners to make this commitment, they want to see a commitment from the city as well. So I think we got to lead from the front. Basha, you had a follow-up?
Yes, I just wanted to be clear. If we pass this as legislation agreeing to match up to 200,000, it is a commitment. Then we're binded to that. It's not just a conversation piece at that point. I mean, it's in legislation. So it does give a commitment to that. That's why I just want to, make sure that we have that number correct, because if we allow up to 200, and I think the beginning of the conversation was stated that then the mayor can do up to 200. If we give him that permission, then he can do that 200. So that's the only reason I just want to make sure we clarify this dollar amount and that it's understood. Once it's legislation, it is a commitment, not just a conversation.
One thing I will note is, again, you would still need to pass legislation after that, once you have all the petitions in to approve the SID. So if you didn't then agree with the 200, let's say it went all the way up to 200 and that's what it was signed for, and you didn't feel that that was appropriate based on what else was raised from the other owners, you would not, you have the choice not to approve the creation of the SID later in the process. But yes, it is a commitment that you're giving to allow the mayor to sign on an amount that he thinks is appropriate up to 200,000.
Is our council clerk on the meeting? Jen, are you here?
This is Valencia. I'm on.
Okay, hi, Valencia. Okay, so if we were to move forward with this, what type of action would need to be taken? What would our ask be for what the law department to draft legislation and bring it back to the committee for us to discuss the language and the dollar amount, or what would the motion be or the ask from this committee?
Well, first you need to clarify what the first ask is from this particular meeting. And whatever that is will be what you want to move forward and ask the law department to draft the language. And again, they can draft the language and it can come back to committee for yet another conversation as proposed language. It doesn't have to go through meetings of council at that point. So get clarity of what, this last hour and a half, what you guys have been talking about and what the first step is. And so that would be your first, what the ask is for the first step as it relates to legislation. And that's what you'll be requesting, that the law department put some language together for you all.
Well,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, V. Shannon, you want to go back to that, your PowerPoint on the actual legislation, the ask, and kind of go over what it is you're particularly asking for today?
Yeah. I just want to make sure at the end of the meeting that Julius and Lauren, that you guys can make the motion of whatever is being asked.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, so that is, excuse me, losing my voice. That is the ask, is that you all draft legislation that at future committee meetings, you would then, be proposed legislation that you would be reviewing, and the legislation would be authorizing the mayor to sign on to a downtown SID petition for X contribution up to X amount. And then that would allow the mayor to, that would kind of show the property owners as we start talking to them that you're definitely in for something. And if the mayor signs on to a petition at a certain amount, you're kind of in for that through the process as we go through into the legislative process. So we definitely know that there are more committee meetings that would happen to actually, finalize that piece of legislation.
Answer your question, Basha?
Yes, I did. I'm not going to be making the motion. So if you and Lauren got it, then yeah, then that's great.
Okay. I just want you to be prepared when it's time for you to make the motion. Okay, we're gonna move on. Thank you, Shannon and Sharon, Cityscape MS Consultants, for your presentation. We're gonna move on to the next bullet point on the agenda. which Councilwoman Adamsack is going to be resuming chair now. So
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next topic, to ordinance 21-172. Who is going to be starting off speaking on that?
I will.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, so the legislation that was presented to City Council is requesting the expansion of the existing community reinvestment area. The purpose of it being to encourage new construction and remodeling existing structures on the increased value of the property. The city currently has a program in place that covers about 75% of the city, and there's a remaining 25% that we're requesting be expanded to align with a housing strategy. So I wanted to, before we get into the discussion about the housing strategy, clear in discussing the difference between what we already have in place and what's being proposed. For the most part, council sees tax abatements coming forward on the commercial side, and that's because those particular projects are negotiated per project and brought to City Council for approval. That's not going to change. We're still going to utilize the enterprise zone program. The way the program is structured, we typically can provide 10 years, 75%. It's up to 75%, and that number has been in place because that's within council's authorization to move forward without school board approval. Anything beyond 75% requires school board approval. And so, you know, those are ongoing conversations, and something that it is a challenge in terms of getting that number above that particular abatement. So what we're discussing today is the community reinvestment area, and that being focused on housing and what will be done on the community development side in terms of utilizing the tax abatement. So community development being to build stronger and more resilient communities, and with economic development, we're doing it to foster economic growth. So I wanted to talk about quickly how the program is being utilized in place now for the existing 75% of the city. It benefits existing homeowners, not just new construction. With the existing homeowners, if they are interested in making investment into their property and improving their homes, this is a tool for them. So we are providing this tool for 75% of the city. We want to expand that to 100%. So it's not always about bringing in new housing, but being able to provide a tool to our existing residents and encouraging them to invest into their properties as well. So based on my discussions with the auditor's office and getting a good sense of where this comes into play, because the abatement applies to improved value only, which means that it's in place to abate what the auditor might come in and assess as an increased tax value because of a resident improving their home. The typical type of improvements that result in an increase in your property taxes is building a new porch, remodeling your basement or attic so you're expanding your living space. If you're just putting a new addition onto your home, installing a sunroom, indoor fireplaces, increasing the number of bathrooms, not necessarily renovating your bathroom, but going from 1 to 2 and increasing that number, building or enlarging a garage. And if we're talking about a vacant, abandoned property, that kind of expands. So if you're, gutting and renovating a home or apartment building, whatever the residential structure is, that can kind of expand what would typically be an improvement that results in increased value because we're talking about putting something back into productive use. So the idea is to make this program available to existing homeowners and not creating these artificial boundaries. So I know that later on in the presentation, this is going to be discussed a bit, but in general, what you'll find is because of these boundaries, within your own neighborhoods, you may have, for example, Midlothian, where one side of the corridor can benefit from the tax abatement and the other side cannot. So your neighbors who fall within a CRA area, because they're on that boundary, they can get the benefit of the tax abatement. You're on the wrong side, so you don't. And we want to make certain that we're not following arbitrary lines and making this tool available for all of our residents. So I wanted to briefly talk about how this tool has been used in the past. So the CRA itself dates back to 1980, but we had ordinance and approval of reestablishing the CRA and making it more efficient and consolidated in 2011. The prior use of the CRA has been an effective tool and been critical in some of the developments that have happened to date, and that includes Choice and Jubilee Homes, Beechwood Estates, Castle Court in the Arlington neighborhood, Hope 6 project. So all of those projects, the tax abatement was part of those earlier discussions in making sure that the projects were feasible and heavily relying on the tax abatement in order for those projects to be successful. I think Beverly may be discussing the next few slides.
Beverly? You're muted, Beverly.
Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Recall from the earlier slide that HUD's community development goal is to build stronger and more resilient communities. And the city can actually accomplish this goal by promoting revitalization and stabilization projects and activities. And with that said, I want to move on to the slide about the housing strategy. And one of the tools in order to address housing development in the city of Youngstown is to build a pipeline, which includes extending the community reinvestment area, the CRA, to cover the entire city. And one of the important action steps in that process would be to engage the appropriate city departments like we're doing now, and plus a lot of our partners, and will strategically target and assemble land, buildings that have the potential for development or reuse as housing, and to further try to provide funding for housing development, seeking funding for housing development. Next slide. And one of the benefits, and I thought this was really important, that this is not just a benefit to one area of the city, but to increase the number of development projects, and it will improve opportunities for providing new affordable housing and improvement to existing housing to moderate and low income households. So that is an important factor. And one of the examples, I think a good example, is the Arlington Heights that we did back with the Hope 6. And another important factor as we move through the different processes that we'll be going through with the CRA and with our development projects is to hold public meetings so that we can keep you updated, the community updated, and educate the public regarding CRA related housing development actions. And I'm going to turn it over now to Ian. He's going to talk more into the CRA, about the CRA expansion.
Go ahead, Ian. Thank you, Beverly.
Yes, thank you, Beverly. Good morning, almost afternoon. So the first thing I wanted to just make clear is that the CRA is a tax incentive. So it's not a grant, it's not a direct resource. Expanding it citywide is not going to move resources from one place to the other, but likely may incent some development that otherwise is not going to happen. If you see the map here on the screen, you'll see the blue areas are the current CRA eligible census tracts and block groups in the city. The areas not in blue are areas that are not currently included. Those include parts of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th wards. So the reason and the need that we're proposing to expand the CRA citywide is, since this has been enacted and updated in 2011, the city has continued to experience population decline. And almost every neighborhood, every block group in the city has felt that, some more than others, but it's definitely a citywide issue. We've also seen the low to moderate income population of just about every census tract in the city increase. So even all of those block groups that are not included in the current CRA, many of those census tracts have at least one low to moderate income block group. Additionally, as you all know, our home values, while we've made some progress there, they're still much too low. We're well below the state average, the regional average, the national average. And when we couple that, what's happened in the past year, we've seen an exorbitant increase in construction costs. So any type of remodeling or construction has gone up, yet our values aren't keeping pace with that. As a result of that, we've seen very little residential construction activity in our neighborhoods outside of the downtown the past 15 years. And I think we can even go back much further than that. So this is one tool, as Beverly mentioned, from the housing strategy, one tool of many that will help us to compete more effectively, both in our regional development market in the Mahoning Valley, but also in Northeast Ohio and the broader region. There are a number of benefits, of course, to doing this, including contributing to further stabilizing an investment in all of the city's neighborhoods, attracting more people, building better quality housing. That includes our existing housing, incenting our existing homeowners, that may perhaps be on the fence about putting an addition on their home or adding a bathroom. This may be an incentive that helps put them over the top in making that decision. They know their taxes aren't going to go up because they add an addition off the back of their house. Additionally, having this citywide simplifies the marketing of it. As Sharon alluded to, you could live on Midlothian on one side of the street, you're in it, on the other, you're not. So just saying it's citywide, you know that you can access this benefit everywhere. You don't have to go look up your block group or try to figure any of that out. It also, I think, it makes a clear statement to the region and to the development marketplace that Youngstown wants to be attractive and competitive in the housing development marketplace. But again, as I mentioned, this is one tool, and I can't really understate this or overemphasize this enough. This is one tool of many. We've been here before talking in more general terms about the housing strategy in November and again in February and March. The CRA alone is not going to be enough to get us to where we want to be, but it is one important tool. There's other things that we're going to have to do to incent more housing development, more investment in our existing housing stock. Some of those may include things like having a gap funding program. Councilman Oliver, this is something you and I have talked about briefly in the past. We see places like Cuyahoga County and Cleveland having effective programs that do that in addition to CRA. We also have to assemble our land. We have to develop more local developers and neighborhood people, mom and pop rehabbers that can do the work. And we have to be aggressive about marketing and also relationship building with all the actors in the development process, realtors, bankers, developers, rehabbers. So this is one tool, but again, it is a very important tool in this process.
Then I'll take it from here, just going over the examples and some numbers with it. In regards to new construction, if you were to construct a $150,000 home, which is obviously real low and likely with construction costs right now would not take place. But just looking at the numbers, in terms of the $150,000 home, the year-end tax value on that additional increment would be $3,600 per year. You could incentivize a builder to do this new construction project over the course of 15 years by potentially saving $50,000 to $54,000, just which could make the capital stack work in regards to new construction. In regards to remodeling, if someone had a home that was worth $50,000 and they were to build an improvement, whatever it might be from that list that Sharon shared earlier, valued at $50,000 auditor value, it could be abated for 10 years, potentially saving them $12,000 total over the course of that CRA tax abatement for a current owner-occupied structure, which is significant when you're looking at a project of that size and scale. It could really move the needle in terms of an owner-occupied structure improvement. As we referred to, we were just looking at different areas of the city where the street really is the boundary that the neighbor on the left would not be able to build an improvement with these benefits, whereas the neighbor on the right or the east side of the street would. And we see this is the 3rd ward. The 4th ward has this example on Connecticut. The 5th ward, currently no one is eligible. No one would be incentivized to build these sorts of improvements. The 6th ward, north of Midlothian, they would be able to, but south of Midlothian, they would not be able to. On West Midlothian, as well as south and north, flipped here on East Midlothian. Looking across the state, Shannon shared some great information on peer SIDs. We did research into peer citywide CRAs where it's been implemented far and wide, small scale and large scale cities, even as close as Columbiana, where they're seeing a boom in construction of both residential and commercial. Firestone Farms, they're building more lots and more roads out there. And they say in the Business Journal, that article that came out a few days ago, all of this works now because of the 15-year property tax abatement. And you see the significant population that is clustering around there because this is in the works there. This is happening there now. Canton, they've seen the successful model in other cities. Looking at Akron, we'll take a look at that next, but they passed theirs back in July of 2019 based on the successful model of Akron. And then looking at Akron, this was the same exact article that Canton was looking at, but how it works in Akron is it makes the numbers pencil out. If you're looking at a pro forma, it could give you the option to do it or not to do it because the numbers could work out using this incentive program. A very interesting fact is in 2015, there were 10 houses built in the city. And now in 2019, when this article was written, there were 1,200 units in some stage of development. And you look at that plot map there, that was the 5th single family development that was done in Akron under that program. And there were 110 units of residential planned for that specific development pictured there. Overall, just final outcomes of this is that new home construction and renovation will increase the values of all properties across the city. We see it now with the real estate values across the country rising, but having these comparable prices, these increased auditor values will benefit everyone. There's the potential to grow the population. Building new homes can bring middle-class families into Youngstown and grow demand for our schools. It supports the small businesses and other services throughout the community. And not a dollar will be taken away from any other services. This is not taking away from any other buckets of money. This only brings more dollars into the community by incentivizing people to come into the city of Youngstown. This was the last slide, but I'll open it up to discussion. Any other questions, or go back to any other slides if anyone has any questions.
Julius?
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I know there are those of us that already knew what this, entailed, but just for the public to be able to see exactly what this piece of legislation will be able to do for the city is, I think, is great, just to be able to go into detail. And I actually, even though I had a good idea, I actually learned some things today about, what this entails. So I just saying thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Through the chair.
Samantha?
Thank you. Okay, so just I think this is a good idea. My fear is that what we'll see is more investment in those areas that fall outside of the LMI areas. And it still won't pick up in those hard hit areas that it was initially, that CRA investments were initially, that was initially set up for. So my request is that if we make the city a complete CRA area, if those applying for these incentives still meet the LMI requirements. So if they meet all of the LMI requirements and they're in that fall under all those guidelines laid out by HUD, then they can do the tax incentives. And then my next question might be for Sharon. What is the current usage? How often do we see this taken advantage of inside of the city on those low to moderate income census tracts?
Chair. The CRA abatement has been more widely used when we're talking about significant, massive housing development properties and properties. I mentioned some of those before, which are actually scattered. There were a few on the east side that benefit from that, Arlington Heights as well. So it's a critical tool in the beginning stages. When you're looking at a developer that wants to invest and they're looking at their return on their investment, whether the value of the property will work out to the investment that they're putting into it. So, that's part of that conversation that Ian talked about, in that they have to see that the investment that they make meets the property value and their ability to sell, so that they're recouping their money. That becomes a big deal when you're talking about significant investment and multiple housing units. And, in some of those projects, we were talking 100 units. Some of them were a little smaller and they were 10 to 12. So we probably have about 2 to 3 individual homeowners who will apply for tax abatements annually. We actually, my most recent one was on Ohio Avenue in your ward, Samantha. And it's an interesting story in that they actually lived in Hubbard, and they had a property that was a family home. And the matriarch of the family passed away. They were looking to sell the property, and after we had conversations and talked to them about the benefit of the tax abatement, they decided to move to Youngstown from Hubbard because of the investment that they made into that particular property. So it is beneficial on some of the kind of one-off. There are going to be benefits to individual homeowners. I don't think you're going to see the volume as you would when we're talking about some of the larger scale projects, but certainly it benefits homeowners in their decisions to make investment into their home. So what a lot of times I see is ebb and flow. It's good that this is part of a housing strategy, in that community development is using this tool and making that part of a larger strategy in terms of attracting housing and looking into options for funding and resources that are available. What happens typically is I'll talk to a community group. There will be a home that benefits from the tax abatement. It goes to Board of Education. It makes the news. People call and they're interested in it. So we'll get 2 or 3 individual homeowners that find out about the program and they want to apply. So as we find venues and talk to different community groups and make those programs known, we'll get initial response, and then it just kind of dies down again because there's no ongoing promotion, but we do look for opportunities to talk about the tax abatement and letting the neighbors and residents know that it's available.
Thank you, Sharon. And prior to the slideshow coming down, I didn't see all of these hands up. I'm not sure if Mike had his hand up first or Jeff. Mike did. Go ahead, Councilman Ray.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Adamczak. I just, as discussed in the presentation, I think it makes sense when we're trying to talk to constituents and one side of the street's not including the other side is. Again, this isn't a limited bucket of funds, so it doesn't, if we give somebody more, somebody doesn't get less. It's the way it's based. It's a great tool to add to our portfolio. And it only, is going to benefit, much like in the previous conversation about the district downtown and how that radiates out. I mean, ways to improve any neighborhood or any parcel, in the city is going to benefit other ones. So I just think it makes sense. It's a good conversation, as Councilman Oliver said, educating the public on this. This is why these meetings are good, letting folks know, but and understand the plan as well. So I think it makes sense to expand it. Again, it's not taking away from anyone else or any other neighbors that are currently in it. And this is just another opportunity where we can put our efforts into hopefully seeing some continued growth and continued much needed investment in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Jeff, and then Ian.
Yes, I just wanted to address the low to moderate income component that Councilman Turner raised in saying why we would expand it or wouldn't expand it. And to build on what Councilman Ray was saying, that this isn't something where one person getting it deprives another group or another person from getting this benefit. I want to speak more to just what the purpose of the legislation is and the Ohio statutory scheme. And the statutory scheme indicates that the community reinvestment area is appropriate for areas that have housing facilities or structures of historical significance that are located in areas where new housing construction or repair is discouraged. So just as a bit of a historical on this, that to add to what Sharon said, the first CRA passed in the city was in 1980. That was 40 years ago. So in the last 40 years, my house on the west side, for example, built in 1955, is now 66 years old. So in 1980, of course, there was a reason why the west side wouldn't be included. Most of those homes were newer construction at the time and didn't fit the statutory definition of a structure of historical significance. There wasn't that contraction of new development. In the meantime, 40 years have gone by, and so I think to the purpose of the legislation, it's not something that is only meant to attract low or moderate income census tracts. This is something that is meant to address a particular area of stress in the housing market. And to the point about Columbiana County, that's seen development over there, and it's opened up a boom for them because Columbiana County had those qualifications under the statutory scheme.
Thank you. Ian?
Yes, if I may. So I just want to make a few clarifications too, building on what was just said. The first is that our current CRA does not include all LMI areas. So if we look at the city's current annual action plan, every census tract and block group north of Mahoning Avenue is an LMI block group or census tract. If we look in Councilwoman Davis's ward, the Pleasant Grove census tract, that's an LMI tract. Those places aren't included. So just about every census tract has block groups at this time that are LMI. I think the other comment I'd like to make in response to Councilwoman Turner's questions, your point is well taken about how do we incent development everywhere? I think that's where we need to have multiple tools. If we look at places like Cleveland, for example, they have a citywide CRA, but then they have a gap funding program, and it's different based on the market. So in the, let's say, the weakest neighborhoods, the gap funding might be $50,000, whereas let's say in a neighborhood with a hot market, there's no gap funding. And then in the middle neighborhood, maybe it's 20,000. So that's why I said this is not a panacea. It's one tool we have to put in place of many to ensure we do have a equitable distribution of development across the city. But I think, you know, as we do this, we need to keep moving and looking at those other tools and put them in place as quickly as we can.
And may I, through the chair, may I interject something to that also?
Yes.
And this might seem like a simple tool, but a lot of communities are really strong on having a nonprofit advocacy groups and so forth that really make sure that LMI aren't harmed in the processes of, you know, revitalization and any type of strategies that move forward. And I think too, the community development department itself will be a strong advocate for LMI to make sure no one or no particular group is left behind as we move through different strategies, projects, and so forth.
Thank you, Beverly. Samantha?
Thank you. So thank you everyone for your response. That definitely adds more clarity. Jeff, my question is, can we add to the current piece of legislation that the applicants, and what I really mean is there are residential applicants that maybe were applying, they are remodeling their home or adding to those that list that Sharon laid out for us, that they meet the LMI. So they're between 50 and 80% of the HUD median income. So can that be added to it so that we are ensuring that those people that are living in the city whose, you know, income is low have this incentive?
Through the chair, if I may, my reading of the statutory scheme would say no. And actually, what, if I understand your question correctly, that would actually exclude certain individuals applying for this who have already been authorized under the current CRA in the city from taking advantage of that. As Ian was talking about, certain census tracts that are already included are not LMI. Some that aren't included are LMI. But my understanding of your question was that can we put a requirement on an individual applying for this to that they be LMI? And my answer would be no to that, if I understood your question.
So yes, that's I'm sorry, through the chair.
Samantha.
So yeah, that's my question. It's not so much with the census tract, because how I understand it, and Sharon help me to make sure that I'm clear on this, that an individual can apply for this abatement for their home, correct? And when they apply, maybe walk me through that process and how we determine, yes, you can, like, I guess that's what I want to make sure, that those people that are applying, how we make that determination in our process, they fall under those LMI guidelines. And I'm just using LMI guidelines because someone that can afford a $250,000 home is in someone that's buying a home on land contract, you know, like those are the type of things those are the type of people that I don't want to see left behind, because really it incentivizes people in those better, more maintained areas, not that they don't need to be, to invest in their homes, or for us to really look towards those people or market to them, and not so much market to the person where there's only one house left on the street. So I just want to ensure that it's equitable, and that's what I want to see. And that's what I want to know that is going to happen, is that this is going to be equitable across the city. Because right now, a lot of the development that we're seeing happening is not happening equitably across the city. And that's to the eyes of our constituents, but also in reality, how it's happening. So this process, making the CRA, which I think is a great idea, I just want to make sure that we are really drilling down on how we support those really, really hard hit communities that haven't had the support that they needed.
If I, through the chair, if I could respond directly to that.
Yes, and then Ian, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jeff.
That's fine. Thank you. Councilman Turner, what I hear you saying is that you want to make sure that this program is addressing those needs. My response from a legal perspective is that this program is not designed to do what you're talking about or asking here. This program is designed for housing tracts and census tracts based on the nature of the housing facility, the housing stock in those areas. It's not designed at the state level to address those LMI concerns that you're raising here. So as Ian was talking about earlier, this is one tool in a toolbox. What I'm hearing you say is that you want it to address LMI concerns. In the tracks that it currently exists in, it does not do that. And if it were to do that, we would actually end up excluding more people than we currently have included in this program. So the idea, as I understand it, is just for council to recognize that the entire city housing stock satisfies the statutory state of Ohio definition for this program, and that council wants to make this available to everyone in the city, or to encourage people to invest and develop in the city.
Thank you, Ian.
Yes, if I may, to Councilwoman Turner's question, I think the reality of what's been happening with CRA is that it does benefit low to moderate income people. The developments that Sharon laid out are all affordable housing developments. We want to see more of that across the city. We want to see investors renovating housing, so we have lead-safe rental housing. We want to see more rental housing developments. And one thing that developers look at, no matter where ultimately the location is, are they going to access the abatement? Now, the developer may not be, in fact, a low to moderate income person, but the housing may benefit low to moderate income people. I think the other thing that we have to look at, and this gets back to having a kind of a tiered incentive program, I think we want investment in all census tracts from all types of people. I think, thinking our most distressed census tracts that we're going to incent new housing development simply by targeting low to moderate income people, I don't think we're going to get as far as any of us want to. So I think that it is something we need to be committed to. And I do hear you loud and clear on what you're saying. And I think that's why we need to look at other tools, but I'm not sure this is the one to restrict in that type of way, because I don't think we can do that. But I also think that I want to be clear in saying that I do believe expanding this will have a benefit to low to moderate income people. It will increase overall housing quality. We have thousands of low income people living in slum quality rental housing. We need to change that. And this is one of the ways that we're going to be able to do it.
Thank you, Ian. Sharon.
So what I wanted to specifically address was Councilwoman Turner's question about how the program is currently operated. And the explanation that Jeff provided is adequate and accurate in terms of the way this program works. It addresses a census tract in improving the housing stock overall. It's not designed for individual residents. The individual resident gets the benefit of the tax abatement, but the program is structured to improve the housing stock of a census tract. So no matter who makes that investment, it's improving the value of the entire neighborhood. They're all benefiting from it. And we don't look at each applicant and determine their eligibility based on the applicant. It's based on a census tract. So you're entitled to a tax abatement. Any individual moving into that particular area, if it's a CRA designated census tract.
Thank you, Sharon. Mike.
Thank you, Councilman Adamczak. Through the chair, I want to thank Jeff Molinterno for his explanation. I mean, that makes sense, saying what the intent is. Sometimes we want programs to work a certain way, and unfortunately they can't. I think Councilwoman Turner does express concerns that we all have for the folks, and we want to be equitable. However, this vehicle seems like it's a great tool. The expansion of this great tool makes sense. It makes sense to make it work for the whole city. So like those examples in the presentation, one side of Midlothian versus another side of the street, trying to sort that out. I think expanding this, and then also I think working with, Sharon's office and making these tools available, or maybe a simple flow chart or how this works or things like that to educate the public, to show, you know, the simple, if I have this and I invest in this, it equals this amount of savings over the life of that, maybe keeping folks putting in there. And I know out, you know, in politics and knocking on doors, you can see the aging infrastructure all over, you know, folks, I think as Jeff said, houses that were built in the 60s that are now how old, you know, they need new, you know, they need new steps, you know, these concrete people's, you know, facades are failing on their houses, the eaves, all those things all over the city. We have aging housing stock, and any kind of boost to do improvements to that would be of benefit. It's going to make all of our properties go up. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilman Ray. Councilman Davis.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I'm glad to see this kind of, if we were to pass this, I would be in complete support of this. I think this is something that that benefits all of our homeowners. And I think we'd see some expansions on houses, you know. So I fully support this this piece.
Thank you, Councilwoman Davis. I too just quickly want to mention, I mean, I'm in support of this as well. And then just as a general point, I feel we've been in this meeting for almost 2.5 hours. And I know traditionally we try to keep the meetings in a more under that time frame. Are there any other questions regarding this particular piece of legislation? No? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for presenting and for clarifying that, not only for us, but for the public. We will go ahead and move on to unfinished business. There is none at this time. The next meeting will be announced as it is scheduled. May I entertain a motion from the committee?
I'd like to make a motion to forward ordinance number 21-172 to the council floor for consideration of passage.
Second.
And also make a motion to request that the law department prepare legislation authorizing the mayor to sign a petition opting the city property to be assessed at $200,000 for the development of a SID.
Up to 200,000?
Up to 200,000 for the development of a SID.
Second. And then I believe at that time, once legislation comes before us, we can discuss with the finance director and we can make an amendment to the dollar amount if necessary. Okay, that is everything. And if I could have a motion to adjourn, please.